back, everybody, for part 2 of our Haunted Perfume series. The 2 deputies and the social worker were mulling around out in the front of the church at the bottom of the stairs, waiting for the sheriff to come out. They waited 5 minutes, and then the senior deputy decided to go look for him. Maybe the sheriff found something that could help them discover what had happened to all those townspeople, why they just suddenly disappeared. So he went up to the church doors and opened them up and went inside. It was starting to get dark outside, which meant it was absolutely inky black on the inside of this church. The sun set earlier here due to being surrounded by all these monstrous trees. Once the sun went behind him, it was as good as down. The church was pitch black, except for one beam of light rolling back and forth in the middle of the aisle. The deputy walked up to it and saw it was the sheriff's flashlight. He picked it up and scanned around the room with both of their flashlights, calling his name. "Sheriff! Sheriff!" he said over and over again, louder and louder. But no answer. He went to the double doors and told the other 2 to look around, because the sheriff wasn't in here. He didn't know where he was, that he was going to go out the back way and see if he was out there. So he went back down the aisle, around the back side of the broken altar, and into a little vestibule where there was a back door. Opening this door wasn't as easy as opening the front doors. With a couple good shoves and a lot of dust, the door came open, just enough to where he could squeeze through. And the deputy thought, well, I'm quite a bit smaller than the sheriff, and if I can barely fit through here, I don't know how he would have gotten out this way. But there's no other exit to the church other than the front of the building. So he went through the back door and down the stairs onto a pathway that was lined by juniper. Walking down the pathway triggered a memory of a perfume that he ran out of last year that he'd been meaning to repurchase, called Oliver Peoples' Indigo by Byredo. The strong junipers and all of the greenery that was around these junipers really reminded him of that perfume. There was also some powdery sand notes in it and some freshness to it that he didn't detect here, but the junipers were the same. He adored that perfume and thought, I have got to buy some more. What have I been waiting for? And then he thought, I better not quit my day job. I suck at poetry. Performance on it is really good as well. I got at least 7-8 hours out of it. It's very unisex. But I remember my girlfriend snagged it more than once. Price on it is pretty good if you get the 50 ml bottle, about mid-range. So once he made it to the end of the path and the junipers had stopped, he was greeted by a large cemetery. He panned the light around and looked as far as the light would reach and counted at least 30 headstones. But he could tell there was many more beyond the darkness. He got such a sense of dread in him, he wanted to go back and get the others, because he didn't want to be here by himself. But he decided he needed to push on. The sheriff was his mentor, was like a father to him. He had to find him. So he kept going. He remembered the sheriff talking about this town the few times he'd been up here, but the deputy had never been up there himself until now. And from what he gathered, there should have only been about 150 people or so, give or take, that lived in this town. And yet, as he goes farther and farther into the cemetery, it looks like Every person in that town must be here. There is over 100 tombstones easily, and they aren't shaped like normal tombstones either. They're not rounded. They're very angular. They're shaped very much like the spires on the top of the church. And in fact, the same symbols that are on the top of the spires also rest on top of these headstones. The senior deputy starts scanning the gravestones. The first few he looks at seem to be from one family, and he notices they all died on the same day. He keeps going and notices another group with the same last name who died on the same day as the other family. He starts to breathe hard and feels his heart start to race. He begins to sweat. He starts backing up from this last group of headstones and almost falls into an open grave. He whips around, just sure there's going to be a casket in there, but it is empty. He takes a sigh of relief. So he keeps going farther into the cemetery. There's no grass around these gravestones, only ferns, weeds, wildflowers. He's looking closer at some of these headstones. All of these headstones have the same date of death on them, October 31st, but none of them have a year. As he's going through the cemetery calling for the sheriff, he notices at the very end of the cemetery, at the very end of the clearing, there's a crypt. As he gets closer to the crypt, he notices there's 2 more empty graves that look like nothing has ever been interred in them. And as he walks between them, scanning his flashlight in each one of them, he gets this very earthy aroma, and it reminds him of another perfume that he adores by a zoologist called Bat. Bat has that real soil notes and fruit notes and animalic notes that make it so unique and put you right in the middle of a cave that's full of bats, maybe without the guano smell. That perfume performed so well, he hadn't even gotten a full bottle of it yet because he hadn't gone through his decant. It was so unique and so special that he coveted it. But it was really tough to find an occasion to wear it to, so he usually wore it for himself. His girlfriend didn't care for it a lot at first, but she was growing to adore it. Performance on it was really good. He got at least 8 hours out of it, and it projected very well too, so he had to be careful when he sprayed. And the cost of Zoologist Perfumes with the artwork on the bottle is outstanding and worth every penny. Then he snapped out of it, "Oh my gosh, I'm thinking of perfumes when I'm looking for the sheriff and an entire town of people is missing. I've got to get it together." So he keeps going with both flashlights. He's trying not to panic. He's trying to be strong. He's trying to be brave. But things are getting weirder and weirder. And he's thinking strange things like perfumes when he's supposed to be focusing. He's always been focused. That's how the sheriff taught him to be, is focused. And now he's thinking of perfumes. So he scolds himself some more as he keeps yelling for the sheriff, calling for him more times on his radio, and still silence. The deputy notices the shadows are growing even longer. He doesn't have much light left before his flashlight will be his only source. And that really makes him uncomfortable when he's at the end of a cemetery about to look inside of a crypt. As he gets closer to the crypt, he sees there's an apple tree growing next to it, with all of its long-forgotten apples laid rotting on the ground. He also is getting strong whiffs of honey and thinks he must be close to the apiary. And then he gets closer to the crypt, and with the wrought iron smell, it immediately makes him think of another perfume, a recent purchase of his and one of his desert island perfumes by Gallagher Perfumes called Rosé All Day. It is one of his absolute favorite perfumes that he's been wearing this fall, with the apple and the honey, and there's patchouli and plum and brown sugar, and of course those metal notes in there. He loves it. It's very unisex. His girlfriend snags it from him all the time, so he's probably going to have to buy her own bottle for her birthday if he ever makes it out of here alive. That perfume really performs well for him. He gets 7-8 hours out of it very easily with 2 sprays, and the price is incredible for a 1-ounce bottle. He's pretty sure he got it for right around $100 on Gallagher's website. It's just an incredible perfume that he can't wait to put on again once he gets home. If he gets home. So he gets up to the gate of the crypt, and he jiggles the handle and notices it isn't locked. There's no padlock on there. He turns to leave thinking, why would the sheriff be in there? There's no reason for me to go in there. And stops when he calls himself a chicken shit wimpy boy. And he turns around and opens the door. He doesn't turn the sheriff's flashlight off, but he puts it in his belt so it's shining down on the ground while he holds his flashlight in his left hand, getting ready to unsnap his holster just in case. When he enters the mausoleum, he is hit with another heavy, heavy fragrance of lilies, and it reminds him of his ex-wife's perfume, her signature scent by Tom Ford, Lice Fuming. It's a very thick lily and ylang-ylang, a little bit of boozy, a little bit of spice perfume, but mostly for him it was thick white lilies, and he hated it. She loved it and he hated it because it reminded him so much of all the lilies everybody gave to them when his father died for the funeral. He couldn't stand the smell of them, and she knew it, but she kept wearing that perfume. Might be one of the reasons why they got a divorce. He remembered also the performance on it was crazy long. She would smell like that damn perfume a good 10-12 hours, and she always seemed to drench herself in it when 2 sprays would have sufficed. It lasted a long time, and it projected huge. And of course Tom Ford's prices can be anywhere from mid-range to expensive, so he never understood why she wore that crap. Except for he thinks it's because he hated it. There's one lone casket at the end of the room. It looks to be made of wood. It's on a stand, a wooden stand that seems to match it. So it's raised up about 4 feet off the ground. As he scans his flashlight some more, he sees just on the other side of the casket there seems to be a chair, a wooden chair and a table. And there's nothing else in the room that he can tell. He goes towards the casket and begins to go around it. He wants to make sure he does his due diligence and checks every corner for the sheriff. He flashes the light over by the chair, and it's just a simple wooden chair. And next to it is a simple little table, but it's what was on the table that made the bile in the back of the deputy's throat rise. It was the sheriff's hat. He quickly unbuckled his weapon, pulled out his gun, scanned the room with the flashlight in one hand and his weapon in the other. He was alone in the room. It was just him, the chair, the hat, the table, and the casket. He started to shake. Sheriff can't be in that casket. It's just going to be a dead body. That's all that's in there. I've seen dead bodies. It's no big deal. It's just a dead body. It's not the sheriff. He keeps saying to himself over and over again. He goes to call him on his radio one more time just to prove the sheriff isn't in there. As soon as he presses the mic, this terrible feedback comes through the mic, almost bursting his eardrums. He really is starting to feel sick now. He goes up to the casket. He realizes the lid is on there very tightly, but it's not secured by anything. But he is not putting down his weapon. So he puts the flashlight down on top of the sheriff's hat, pointed towards the casket. As he pushes with his left hand and uses his right shoulder to nudge the top of the casket off, it moves a little more, and this gust of air comes out of the casket, and it almost makes him choke. It's sulfur and a fecal smell, almost indolic, which reminds him of another perfume by strangers' Perfumerie called Sombra. It's not the sulfur that's reminding him, it's that fecal, that very indolic smell coming from the inside of the casket that reminded him of this perfume. Because Sombra is very heavy white florals and a little bit of orris, and there's champagne or something like that in there that he never did get in that perfume. And he remembered it was really an incredible experience when he first smelled it, because he was completely repulsed by it. But the more he worked with it and the longer he wore it, he started to understand it a little more and started to enjoy it. Well, the first time he wore it, he was still married. And she hated that perfume. And that made him wear it even the more. He thought, you're going to wear a perfume I hate, I'm going to wear a perfume you hate. So that pretty much meant they never saw each other. And that's the way they liked it until they got a divorce. And then he met his fabulous girlfriend, and he never picked up the perfume again when she was around. It was a scent that was just for him, because the dry down became much more lovely, but that opening was a big poo-poo slap in the face at first. But you have to go for those niche perfumes and let them develop, and really try to understand the really niche perfumes if you want to call yourself a frag head. So that's what he did, and he fell in love with it, to a degree. Performance on it was pretty good, about 7 hours, and he only did 1 spray because it projected pretty good for that first hour. And the price was really reasonable for Sombra as well. It's tough to call it unisex because it takes a very brave woman to wear it. So he thinks of it more as a masculine scent. And he starts thinking, what is there, a perfume witch around here trying to distract me with all these aromas, making me think of perfumes when I've got such serious business to be doing? He keeps nudging on the coffin lid, using his right shoulder, his left hand, slamming. Finally, the whole thing just gives away, and it slams with a bang and a crash on the stone floor. The aroma is really intense now, even though he's taken a step back. He grabs the flashlight that he had left on top of the sheriff's hat. He walks up to the casket. He covers his mouth and nose, because as he gets closer, the sulfur is gone, and so is the reminiscence of strangers' Parfumeries, Sombra, because now he just smells decay, rot, and putrefaction. He doesn't want to look in the coffin, but he knows he has to. He takes the flashlight with his left hand, his weapon with the other, and starts to look inside of the coffin. And then he shines his flashlight into the coffin, and that's when he sees him. And then